popping with the squad? How y'all doing? How y'all living? It's your boy Amari. Happy New Year. We back with a new video to start the year off strong. And what better way to do it than with an album review for one of my favorite artists, Miss Mary J. Blige. Let's start off by talking about what is, in my opinion, the saving grace of this entire album, the production. The production gave such an 90s, early 2000s feel that really turned back the clock and made us feel like we were listening to her first few albums. This sound, it really was nostalgic, and it really drove a lot of the interest that I had to continue listening to this album. 30 plus years into her career, it just doesn't feel like her vocals have that same hit, that same dynamicism that she had early on in her career. It feels as though her vocals fall a little flat in certain places, but even still, she can sing and her voice is incredible. With samples from the notorious B.I.G. to Gene Carn, even to En Vogue, it feels like more than anything else, this album really is a time capsule of her career. Something that really puts a cap on what she was known for throughout the tenure that she's had in the music industry. To say that I didn't enjoy this album would honestly be a lie, because I definitely did enjoy this. I probably enjoyed this album the most since Stronger with Each Tear, and that album for me was just... That being said, listening to this album honestly took me back to when I was a kid and my uncle would put on his music while we cleaned the house on a Saturday morning. Those days where he would wake me up in the morning bumping some Luther, or bumping some Michael Jackson, or bumping some Foreplay, or some older artists that just really got the energy going throughout the house. This is that same energy I felt, but it mainly relied on the production. With production credits from Darkchild, aka Rodney Jenkins, who, if you don't know, was on The Boy Is Mine or Deja Vu. Big names, big titles. There was a production credit from Kaytranada, which I found incredibly interesting. It was probably one of my least favorite tracks on the album, but what I enjoyed about it was how Kaytranada and Mary J. Blige's sound meshed very well together. S. of Dot and Pro Productions makes several appearances on this album. And for those of you who don't know who that is, they've worked with everybody from the Young Money roster to King Los to G-Unit and Ludacris, Raheem Devon. So many different well-known names have come across the production desk of S. That being said, the production on this album really makes it make sense why there are so many tracks on this that lean more into the hip-hop of the Queen of Hip Hop and Soul aspect of Mary J. Blige's moniker. It really felt like she was at home on these tracks more so than anything. And those honestly made for some of my favorite tracks on this album. She did a track with Fat Joe. She did a track with Fabulous. She did a track with Jadakiss, and those tracks honestly took me back to when she was at the prime of her career and when she honestly gave us the best sound. Breathing, which is the Fabulous assisted track and the leading single off this album, really was a strong start. It made me feel like we were going into something good, and honestly, it feels like it didn't really let up. As much as I didn't like all of the tracks on this album, it really does feel like she didn't let her foot off the gas in terms of her performance, in terms of the production, and in terms of the flow of the album. Need You More featuring Jadakiss was the second track off this album, and once again, I felt like she was leaning heavily into her sound that she was known for, and honestly, it was a great continuation of the first track, and it made me feel like this album was going to be hit after hit. For me, this album really does start to pick up again with the track Here I Am. It's incredibly soulful, very stripped down, nothing but piano chords and her vocals to carry us through the track. And honestly, this is where I really started to feel that old school Mary J. That Mary J that had pain in her voice. That Mary J that sung about what she's been through and that sung about how to keep loving yourself and how not to give up. This is the Mary J that I really wanted to hear, and I cannot help but say she delivered on this track. Superpowers continues on this track of showing her self-love And honestly, this was an enjoyable track. It's not one that I would go back to as much as Here I Am or Breathing, but nonetheless, I think it was a good showing. As the album rounds itself out, we get back to that hip-hop sound with God's Child featuring Fat Joe, which honestly, one of my favorite tracks on this album as well, something that I do find myself going back to quite frequently. And then to end the album, we got I Got Plans, which was a track featuring A$AP Ferg. A$AP Ferg and Mary J. Blige was not on my bingo list of things that I thought I was going to see or expected to see, but nonetheless, it was a pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed this track. I think Ferg really lended himself well to this track, and I think that this was a surprisingly good mesh of different sounds that you didn't expect to hear, unlike the Kaytranada assisted track. With that being said, honestly, I can call this a very solid album. I don't know what she's going to do from here or if she'll even continue to release music. Music is something that I know will always be in her soul, in her heart. Like I said, 30 plus years into her music career, I just don't see her stopping anytime soon, regardless of how her vocals change over the years. That said, this is a very, I would say, solid 6 for me. Like I mentioned earlier, I do not find myself enjoying this album as much as I did, say, Stronger with Each Tear or even her early first, second, or third albums, but it is something that I find myself going back to more than her last few albums. That's going to be it for me on this one. Stay tuned. I am ready to start dropping videos again, so be prepared for that. A lot of content coming your way. Thank y'all for watching. Drop a like, drop a comment. I want to hear what you thought about this album. I want to hear if this is something that you would listen to, or if you're even a fan of Mary J. Let's talk about it. Thank y'all. I'll see you on the next one. I'm gone.